In the land of Canaan, there lived a man named Jacob who had 12 sons. But among them all, one stood out in his father's eyes, Joseph, the son of his beloved wife Rachel. Jacob loved Joseph more than all his other children, and to show this favoritism, he made him a beautiful coat of many colors. Genesis 37 verse 3. This special treatment bred resentment in the hearts of Joseph's brothers. Their hatred grew even deeper when Joseph began sharing his dreams with them. In one dream, Joseph saw himself and his brothers binding sheaves in the field, and suddenly his sheaf stood upright while his brothers' sheaves bowed down to it. In another dream, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed down to him. Genesis 37 verses 5 to 9. Do you intend to reign over us? His brothers sneered. Will you actually rule us? Even Jacob rebuked him, asking, What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? Genesis 37 verses 8 to 10. The seeds of jealousy had taken deep root. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers who were grazing flocks near Dothan. When they saw him coming from a distance, wearing that coat of many colors, their hatred boiled over into a murderous plot. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. Genesis 37 verses 19 to 20. But Reuben, the oldest, intervened, suggesting they throw him into a pit without harming him directly, secretly hoping to rescue Joseph later. So when Joseph arrived, they stripped him of his ornate robe and threw him into an empty cistern. Genesis 37 verses 22 to 24. As they sat down to eat, callous to their brothers' cries, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelite merchants traveling to Egypt. Judah proposed, What will we gain if we kill our brother? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. Genesis 37 verses 26 to 27. And so, for 20 shekels of silver, Joseph was sold into slavery. To cover their crime, the brothers slaughtered a goat, dipped Joseph's coat in its blood, and presented it to Jacob, who mourned believing his beloved son had been torn apart by wild animals. Genesis 37 verses 31 to 34. In Egypt, Joseph was purchased by Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's guard. But even in slavery, Joseph's character shone through. The scripture tells us, The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. Genesis 39 verse 2. Potiphar recognized God's blessing upon Joseph and promoted him to oversee his entire household. Yet prosperity brought new trials. Potiphar's wife noticed the handsome young Hebrew and repeatedly tried to seduce him. Day after day, she pursued him, but Joseph refused, saying, How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Genesis 39 verse 9. One day, when no one else was in the house, she grabbed his cloak, demanding he sleep with her. Joseph fled, leaving his garment in her hands. Scorned and furious, she falsely accused him of attempted assault. Genesis 39 verses 11 to 18. Despite his innocence, Joseph was thrown into prison. Many would have grown bitter, questioning God's justice. But Scripture records, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. Genesis 39 verse 21. Even in chains, Joseph remained faithful, and soon the warden put him in charge of all the prisoners. While in prison, Joseph met two of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, who each had troubling dreams. Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Genesis 40 verse 8. He interpreted both dreams accurately. The cupbearer would be restored to his position in 3 days, while the baker would be executed. Joseph asked only one thing of the cupbearer, Remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. Genesis 40 verse 14. Everything happened just as Joseph predicted. But when the cupbearer was restored, he forgot all about Joseph. 2 more years passed with Joseph in prison. Genesis 40 verse 23, 41:1. 2 more years of patience. 2 more years of trusting God's timing. Then one night, Pharaoh himself had 2 disturbing dreams that none of his magicians or wise men could interpret. Finally, the cupbearer remembered Joseph and told Pharaoh about the Hebrew prisoner who could interpret dreams. Genesis 41 verses 9 to 13. Joseph was quickly brought from the dungeon, cleaned up, and presented before Pharaoh. When Pharaoh said, "I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream you can interpret it," Joseph replied with characteristic humility, "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Genesis 41 verses 15 to 16. Pharaoh described his dreams: 7 fat cows devoured by 7 gaunt cows, and 7 healthy heads of grain swallowed by 7 thin ones. Joseph explained that God was revealing what he was about to do: 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of severe famine. He advised Pharaoh to appoint someone wise to store grain during the plentiful years. Genesis 41 verses 25 to 36. Pharaoh was so impressed that he declared, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Genesis 41 verse 38. At age 30, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister in a single day. Pharaoh placed his signet ring on Joseph's finger, dressed him in fine linen, and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Genesis 41 verses 41 to 43. The 7 years of abundance came and went exactly as predicted, and Joseph stored grain throughout Egypt. Then the famine struck, affecting all the surrounding lands, including Canaan. When Jacob heard there was grain in Egypt, he sent 10 of his sons to buy food, keeping only Benjamin, Joseph's younger brother, at home. Genesis 42 verses 1 to 4. When Joseph's brothers arrived and bowed before him, face to the ground, Joseph recognized them immediately, but they didn't recognize him. The dreams from his youth were coming true. Genesis 42 verses 6 to 9. Joseph tested his brothers' hearts. He accused them of being spies and imprisoned them for 3 days. He demanded they bring Benjamin to prove their honesty, holding Simeon as collateral. The brothers, speaking in Hebrew and not knowing Joseph understood them, said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen." Genesis 42 verse 21. Joseph turned away and wept, hearing their remorse. Yet he continued the test. When they returned with Benjamin, Joseph struggled to contain his emotions. He prepared a feast for them, giving Benjamin 5 times as much food as the others. Genesis 43 verse 34. For the ultimate test of his brother's transformation, Joseph commanded his steward to fill their sacks with grain, but to secretly place his silver cup in Benjamin's sack. After they left, he sent men to pursue them and accuse Benjamin of theft. Genesis 44 verses 1 to 12. When the cup was found, the brothers tore their clothes in grief and returned to Joseph. Judah, the same brother who had suggested selling Joseph into slavery years before, now pleaded passionately for Benjamin's freedom. He offered to become a slave himself, saying, "How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father." Genesis 44 verses 33 to 34. This was the moment Joseph had been waiting for. His brothers had changed. They now valued family over convenience, sacrifice over selfishness, and their father's heart over their own comfort. Joseph could no longer control himself. He ordered everyone except his brothers to leave the room, and then he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him. Through his tears, he declared, "I am Joseph. Is my father still living?" Genesis 45 verse 3. His brothers were terrified, unable to answer. But Joseph said, "Come close to me. I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." Genesis 45 verses 4 to 5. In that moment of reconciliation, Joseph revealed the profound truth he had learned through years of suffering. "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50 verse 20. Joseph embraced Benjamin and wept, then kissed all his brothers and wept over them. He sent them back to Canaan with carts full of provisions and an invitation for the entire family to settle in Egypt. Genesis 45 verses 9 to 15. When Jacob heard that Joseph was alive and ruler of Egypt, he could hardly believe it. But when he saw the carts Joseph had sent, his spirit revived. "I'm convinced. My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Genesis 45 verse 28. The reunion between father and son was overwhelming. When Jacob arrived in Egypt, Joseph prepared his chariot and went to meet him. As soon as he appeared, Joseph threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Jacob said, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Genesis 46 verses 29 to 30. Joseph settled his family in the region of Goshen, and they prospered there. He provided for them throughout the famine, and Jacob lived in Egypt 17 more years. Before he died, Jacob blessed Joseph's sons and all his children, Genesis 48 to 49. When Jacob died, Joseph's brothers feared he would finally take revenge. But Joseph reassured them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50 verses 19 to 20. Joseph lived to be 110 years old, saw his great-great-grandchildren, and made his brothers promise that when God brought the Israelites out of Egypt, they would carry his bones with them. Genesis 50 verses 22 to 25. He died having fulfilled the purpose God had ordained for him, not just to save his family, but to preserve the lineage through which the Messiah would eventually come. God's purposes prevail over human plans. No matter how dire circumstances appear, God is working behind the scenes. What others intend for evil, God can transform for good. Genesis 50 verse 20, Romans 8 verse 28. Character is forged in the furnace of adversity. Joseph maintained his integrity whether he was a slave, a prisoner, or a prime minister. Our response to trials reveals and refines our character. Faithfulness in small things leads to greater responsibilities. Joseph was faithful in Potiphar's house and in prison before being entrusted with a nation. God watches how we handle what He's already given us. Matthew 25, verse 21. Sexual purity is worth any cost. Joseph chose prison over sin, demonstrating that maintaining moral purity is more valuable than temporary pleasure or personal advancement. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18. Forgiveness breaks the cycle of bitterness. Joseph could have destroyed his brothers, but he chose forgiveness and reconciliation instead. Unforgiveness only imprisons us. Ephesians 4 verse 32. God's timing is perfect, even when delayed. From the pit to the palace took over 13 years. God's delays are not denials. He's preparing us and positioning circumstances for His perfect timing. Pride comes before a fall, humility before honor. Joseph's early boasting about his dreams brought suffering, but his later humility before Pharaoh, giving God all the credit, led to his exaltation. Proverbs 18 verse 12. Family reconciliation requires genuine transformation. True restoration isn't just saying sorry. It's demonstrating changed hearts through actions, as Joseph's brothers did with Benjamin. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey of Joseph from the pit to the palace. This story from Genesis chapters 37 through 50 reminds us that no matter what pit we find ourselves in today, whether it's betrayal, false accusations, imprisonment, or forgotten promises, God has not forgotten us. He is writing a story far greater than we can imagine. If this story encouraged you, strengthened your faith, or reminded you of God's faithfulness in your own life, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope today. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring Bible stories and life-changing messages. And make sure you turn on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time we post new content. Remember, your pit is not your prison, and your prison is not your destiny. God has a palace prepared for you. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep walking in integrity. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video.